We're going to be reading Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet, and you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judea, are by no means least among the rulers of Judea. For from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening the treasure chest, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to King Herod, they left for their own country by another road.
This is such an inspiring, traditional Christmas scripture until the end. Until the end, when the wise men share their news with King Herod. Herod invites them, instructs them to let him know about anything they find as they go. And instead, they leave by another road. Herod, let me fill you in a little bit about Herod. So keep that picture of the star, these three great teachers coming and following that star. But meanwhile, in Jerusalem, everybody's seeing that star too. And the buzz has gone out. What's happening here? I'm sure that Herod knew it and heard it. He had been ruler there since 40 BC. He was Roman. He was a Roman puppet king installed there by the emperor. His wife was actually his third wife at that point. She was of royalty from the Jews. So he had his connections in the Jewish community. So there is Herod, and Herod, the king, was frightened. That's the New Revised Standard Version word for it. Other versions of this story say terrified, scared. So imagine the king is frightened. This word actually only shows up 2 other times in the Gospels, actually 3 other times in all of this, the New Testament. It shows up in this verse in Matthew, and then later in Matthew, when Jesus, the grown Jesus, walks on water and calls Peter to join him. And Peter actually steps out of the boat and starts to walk, but then notices the strong wind and is frightened and starts to sink. So frightened is no small word. And we learn, going back to the birth story and the announcement story, that all of Jerusalem is frightened along with Herod. My guess is that all of Jerusalem was frightened because of Herod, because this is a man who has power over armies, over merchants, over all of life there. The power that can send people back to their homes and keep them out of school, the power that can shut life down and make it miserable. In fact, the power that's oppressive and that can take lives as well as letting them thrive. So there's Herod, and here come these three wise people. The gospel doesn't call them kings. This one doesn't. They were probably astrologers from Persia who studied the heavens in order to see if there were signs that signified changes in the global picture of things. The star's purpose, from God's perspective, and from the Jews' perspective, the star's purpose was to reveal that Jesus' birth was a divine intervention of God in the life of Israel. So there's Judah, there's Herod, and Herod in his fear says, oh, go follow the star, find out where that baby is so that I can pay him homage. Was he telling the truth? No, probably not. No. In fact, what's fascinating is here is an infant born. It's not the babiness of Jesus that's scary. It's the reality that he is fulfilling all of these prophecies, right? Prophecies that the Jews have believed and shared and written down for millennia at that point. And so I find this fascinating. The rest of the book of Matthew actually goes into what happens next a while later, when Herod, not having success in locating Jesus, sends out troops to kill all the boy children under the age of 2 in the town of Bethlehem, trying to interfere with the prophecy. Why 2 years old? It's speculated that that's about when the 3 wise people started their journey toward Jerusalem. What does it mean to be afraid? What goes with that? I went looking in one of my favorite books, which is Brené Brown's Atlas of the Heart. She organizes all of these human emotions. This is a person who's done tremendous research of surveys of people's emotional responses. And she started with shame, but she's gone off into all these other things as her research and her reputation have grown. So Brené Brown put together this Atlas of a Heart, a map of the human heart, just as the kings were following, the wise people were following a sort of map put out by the stars and the roads. And her very first chapter is called Places We Go When Things Are Uncertain or Too Much. And this scripture is one of those situations where things are uncertain or too much. And the quality, the feelings that she puts in there are stress, overwhelm, anxiety, worry, avoidance, excitement, dread, fear, and vulnerability. This describes our situation in Jerusalem to a T. Despite all of Herod's power, he does not know one important, tangible fact. Where is that child? Because if he knew, he wouldn't be going to pay him homage. He would be going to kill that child or sending his troops out. Instead, he is festering with this intolerance for uncertainty, which is a huge contributor to anxiety. And for those of us who are neurodiverse around anxiety, we know that anxiety can become almost like a new persona within us that takes us over. Those who are generally uncomfortable with uncertainty, says Brene Brown, are more likely to experience anxiety in specific situations, as well as to have anxiety disorders. Our anxiety, she says, often leads to one of two coping mechanisms: worry or avoidance. I would say that Herod's kind of playing the odds between those two. He's worried sick. He's so worried sick that Jerusalem with him is worried and frightened. And he's avoiding things directly. He's trying behind the scenes to piece it out. But come on now, 3 wise people from the East who not only can read the stars, but can read body language not being so hard to read, who can read the tone of the streets, the things that people are saying to one another about what's going on. And so they're not willing to share. They don't go back. They, in fact, go home by another road. That, it seems to me, is the best introduction to who Jesus will be. One who teaches us to go home by another road. Jesus, Emmanuel, God with us, teaches us, what if we didn't choose yes or no? What if we chose another road? This face on the coin, whose face is this? Well, it sure looks like the Emperor Caesar Augustus to me. Is it yes or no? Jesus says, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, render unto God what is God's. Constantly, there's this going home by another road. What if we did the same? What if, in facing all the troubles, all the anxiety, all the fright there is in this world, we could stand and offer that other road, the road that God has shaped through love, through presence? What if we could shape that road, knowing that at the end of that road and along that road, there was safety and comfort and fellow travelers like ourselves to connect with? What if the fright would lead to peace? Can you even see that happening? Mary and Joseph? Well, Joseph, what follows next in the book of Matthew, Joseph has a series of dreams. They tell him not to bring his family back into Israel, Judah. They tell him to stay in Egypt. They tell him to wait and keep his family safe. And so here again is God intervening and people responding from where they're at. Joseph's focus was keeping his family safe. Joseph's also aware of the prophecies and also aware that prophecies don't stop at the birth. Prophecies are ahead. And remember Mary, who, from another gospel story, recognizes that her son is not necessarily destined for a joyful life. Certainly a hopeful life, but a life that has pain at the end and suffering. Which of those do we choose? Are we frightened? Or do we say, here is my fright, and I'm going to try. I'm going to step out of the boat and trust. Maybe I'll start to sink. But even if Jesus physically isn't there, who will help me in the water? It's the other people in the boat. Even if the fright is so great that on the road to Emmaus, this is the other place in the Gospels where the word frightened shows up, and the only one in the New Testament. On the road to Emmaus, the risen Jesus appears to the disciples, says to them, peace be unto you. And they are, says the scripture, startled and terrified because they thought they were seeing a ghost. Jesus responds, why are you frightened and why do doubts arise in your hearts? Look at my hands and my feet. See that it is I myself. Touch me and see, for a ghost does not have flesh and bones, as you see that I have. What if, as I believe, God puts a spark of God's self in each of us? And it's up to us to say, I will fan that spark and build a fire within. It only takes a spark to catch a fire going. What if each of us looks for the spark of divinity in each other of us? That's what Jesus' presence among us from birth onward invites us to do. Find the presence. Do not be afraid, and catch the spark. Feel the spark in ourselves and keep it going. Be not afraid, for God is with us. Amen.